Welcome to Defund the BBC. I am Calvin Robinson. This week, I have the pleasure of being joined by my old friend, Jonathan Gullis, MP for Stoke-on-Trent. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm very good, my friend. How are you keeping?
Mate, not bad at all. It's been a long time. Good to hear from you. Obviously, you were elected in December for Stoke-on-Trent. How's that going, first of all?
Well, obviously, COVID has made life a bit more complicated than I would have hoped for going into this levelling up agenda. But one thing I have learned is that community spirit is unbelievable in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk, and seeing so many people from across the spectrum just pulling together in order to help people through this difficult time, I think is something to be admired. And I hope that community spirit will continue for many years to come.
Hear, hear. So back in, I think it was June, you publicly stated that you personally think the TV license should be scrapped. You said something like you believe in consumer choice and think it's an outdated module and being made to pay for the BBC isn't fair. And you asked some of your constituents for their views. What did they tell you?
Well, look, the overwhelming majority of my constituents, I think literally all but 5 of the 200 odd comments I got, all said it's time to scrap the licence fee and it's no longer fit for purpose. I think you need to remember that the licence fee was introduced, 1948, if my memory serves me correct, when it was designed for the one channel. And that was because obviously we wanted people to be able to access the news and obviously have some sort of programming equally across the country. The BBC, for me, has outgrown itself. It's got these ridiculous amounts of channels. It's invested in all this other project work. And I think that the reason their finances are in the state they're in is because they've tried to act like a Netflix without having any of the financing behind them, and forgetting that it's the taxpayer that carries the buck, and it simply isn't good enough anymore.
Absolutely. And we'll come back to some of those points because you raised some key points right there. But for me, the issue is that the BBC went back on their word. They made a deal with you guys, with the government, over free licenses for the over 75s. And, you're furious at the BBC's decision. You and 65 of your colleagues signed this brilliant letter to the BBC asking them to reconsider. What response have you and your fellow MPs had from the BBC?
Well, it won't shock you, Calvin, that the response is very much of, it ain't us, Gov, which I just think isn't simply good enough. Like you said, the deal was done back in 2015 that in the financial year that we're in now, they would take over the funding of the free licence fee for the over 75. So they've had 5 years to plan, prepare, budget, and be ready for this. And now they're suddenly bleeding hardship, which is an absolute load of nonsense, to be quite frank. And when you see the extortionate salaries that they're paying some of these, celebrities who can't keep their opinions to themselves, and yet they're working for the BBC, which is meant to be an unbiased station, I just think that people are sick to their back teeth. Like you say, it's a broken promise, and one that won't be forgotten, especially by the elderly residents that I serve, who are absolutely livid.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on there when you say people are sick to the back teeth. So at Defund the BBC, we carried out a poll with Santana Comres and found that 60% of Brits think it's time for the BBC licence fee to change, and 43% of the country feel that the national broadcaster does not do enough to reflect their views. So the BBC are getting it badly wrong, aren't they? It's hardly fair to tax people on the basis of that.
Well, do you know what, Calvin? For me, the BBC represents the metropolitan elite in their ivory towers who probably read The Guardian, have a chai latte with avocado on toast and some chili flakes sprinkled on top. That's not what people on Stoke-on-Trent eat or drink. There we are, salt of the earth, working class people up here. And how many times do I ever see video footage of Stoke-on-Trent? Very rarely. And when they do, what do? They go and find the grottiest looking street, or they go and find, they go and find the extreme ends of, let's say, our local politics, instead of representing what the city is, which is a history that is abundantly clear, globally clear in terms of the potteries, are hardworking, good, honest people who do everything they can for their families and their friends, are a community that is united, has a strong Methodist, community as well, which is very interesting, and the history of that. And I just think that they're so out of touch. I mean, the best example was when they came up on Brexit and they would interview all the factory owners of the potteries and talk about Brexit. And obviously there would be concerns, rightly so, by businesses about what that would do. Yet they didn't speak to the shop floor workers. I represent an area 72% leave. So if that tells you something, then it will show how out of touch the BBC were in places like Stoke-on-Trent.
There are also serious concerns over the way the BBC spends licence fee money, particularly given the eye-watering sums paid to certain BBC presenters, as you mentioned previously. And more than a third of respondents to our survey are unhappy, rising to almost half of over 55s, which is the BBC's core audience. So what are your thoughts on these mega salaries, which you mentioned? You know, people like Gary Lineker earning 8.5 times more than the Prime Minister. Can this be justified when we're asking our lonely, vulnerable, elderly citizens to fund this out of their own pockets?
No, it can't be justified at the end of the day. The BBC was designed to give us free-to-air and broadcast television. It was not, designed to deliver us content, mostly news back in, as I say, in 1948. It was not designed for all these kind of shows that, are very much, in my opinion, focused on the woke agenda that's being jammed down my throat every time I switch the BBC on. And Gary Lineker, being paid to present Match of the Day, which is a very entertaining show, and he does a good job, but I don't see why he needs to be paid millions of pounds in order to do that, especially when he earns additional salary from BT Sport that he's working on as well. I think there's a fair compromise here. If you work for the BBC, which is funded by the taxpayer, then you shouldn't expect enormous sums of salary. If you want to go and earn that, that's what Sky, BT, Netflix and all those other channels are for.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier that even to watch these other channels, you have to still pay money to the BBC because their license, the scope of it is so broad. Surely that scope needs to be narrowed and the BBC's charter should be reduced so that in this digital age, you only pay the BBC for BBC content.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there again, absolutely. And look, for me, I find what most shocking is when I get told, oh, well, what better value can you get than the BBC? I keep reminding people that it's not value because I have to pay the BBC. Value is something like Netflix, where for £15 a month, I can have 8 family members all at the same time watching it. Now, 15 divided by 8 comes out an incredibly small sum of money. And if I want to cancel it, I can cancel it. And at the end of the month, guess what? I don't get charged again. Whereas in the BBC, I don't have that opportunity. I have to pay it, even though I don't want to watch it anymore, because I think they are no longer representative of communities outside of that London metropolitan bubble.
Yeah. It seems like we're both on the same page with this, but the BBC are saying we can't change anything until our charter comes up for renewal in 2027. Is there anything MPs can do about it?
Well, I think first thing we need to do is decriminalise the licence fee, and I hope that piece of legislation comes through ASAP, especially now because the BBC are saying that they will be prosecuting those over 75s who don't pay their licence fee. So we should be doing a service to those pensioners who have rightly had that free access to the licence fee and say that instantly they will not face criminal charges. I think that would be something that we owe to the people as members of Parliament, and I certainly will be calling for it. And then I think let's start the charter review discussion now. Let's get in the House of Commons chamber and start that debate. The earlier we do it, the better it will be, the more informed and information will be available. Let's call out the fact that the BBC are paying extortionate sums to private companies to go and basically harass or go after individuals for not paying their licence fee, even if they've already said they're not doing it. But it's this constant sort of spy culture that's going on, I think, is just totally unnecessary.
Completely. And another argument we often hear in favour of the BBC is the education angle. So obviously I have to come to you as a former teacher. Last week, BBC Bite Size tweeted out a cartoon image that they have since agreed was misjudged, but this was an image of 3 teenagers in a changing room and captions about their pronouns. Now, the Safe School Alliance have made an official complaint over the BBC breaching their own guidelines and editorial impartiality, and the 1996 Education Act as well, by pushing this political ideology on children. So obviously, like as I mentioned, you're a former teacher. What are your views, regardless of what your views are on pronouns and the trans debate, what do you think about the BBC pushing this political agenda onto children through their educational channels?
I think it's absolutely horrendous. As teachers, Calvin, and you know this from your own experience, we go in and we're impartial and we work really hard to show all sides of the argument. And what the BBC did there is not show a balanced perspective of different views and opinions in a very complex debate, as you rightly say, about what the way forward. I think what happens again is that the BBC sort of sees what's going on Twitter and assumes that Twitter is representative of the United Kingdom. And that really isn't the case. I quit Twitter because it was becoming a left-wing cesspit, to be quite frank, of cancel culture and shouting down and piling on rather than actually having open, honest discussion. And I was speaking to Bartholomew in London, not to Brendan in Stoke-on-Trent. So I felt very much that there was a need, and I think the BBC just constantly shows by those actions how out of touch it is. And it's all very well and good saying it's misjudged, But, who's making these decisions in the office? How many times are we going to get an apology and hear that another misjudged thing took place? There has to come a point where we say enough is enough. And I'm certainly sick of the BBC's actions in this regard.
Brilliant. Spot on. So my only question remaining is, what needs to change? What do we want to see from the BBC going forward?
I think the BBC, they've got a new Director General who's making all the right soundings, but obviously actions speak louder than words. And I'm looking forward to seeing some robust action against presenters. Very clearly for me, if we've got presenters, it doesn't matter whether they are paid through the PAYE or they're paid as a self-employed contractor. If they are spouting political views on social media platforms, they can't work for the BBC. We need to obviously decriminalise the licence fee as well. And the charter review, for me, needs to be very clear, which is it's time to scrap the licence fee and let the BBC compete in an open marketplace. Look, I'm sure there are plenty of people who want to pay a subscription to the BBC or as part of a Sky or Virgin Media package. And if they do, that's fair enough to them. But the BBC needs to realise we're in a modern age and consumer choice is king. And it will be a big wake-up call for the BBC to find out how many consumers are happy to continue funding what is quite a luxury model compared to many other countries around the world.
Jonathan Gullis, a man of common sense, thank you very much for speaking to us today. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Calvin, mate. Appreciate it.